Hey gamers, it's Wintermute here from Grind This Game, back with the Oxygen Not Included tutorial series, and I forget what part I'm on now. I think this is part 5, I think. So in this episode I want to show you how to use some automation and some smart batteries. So let's get started with that. In order to use the smart battery, if you look under the research menu, you can see smart battery, if I can find it, is up here by generic sensors. And the smart battery is pretty useful because it's going to allow you to more efficiently use your power. But in order to build a smart battery, you need some refined metals. And to refine metals, you need either the refinery over here in smelting, or you need the rock granulator, which is a less efficient way to refine metals, but it's great in the early game. It also requires less power and it's easier to set up. So we will build one of those first because we need refined metal. So I'll do that maybe over here. Now I'm using debug mode just to speed things up a little bit. But under, I think this is under utility. Or is it under refinement? Let's see here. Refinement, rock granulator, there it is. So I'll build it out of copper, should be fine. It does get pretty warm, but now I did move my relaxation rec room over. It was here before, but now it's over here. And actually this power circuit is pretty close to overloaded right now, so I'll probably have to put it on a different circuit. I might put it on this circuit down here. Actually, I might build it down here because it's closer. So let's get rid of this and put it down here instead. If I can find it again. Refinement. Rock granulator. We'll stick it right... Oh, wrong thing. Rock granulator. Stick it right here. Now it needs power, so we already got a cold generator set up here, so we'll just hook it up there. And we'll set it as a priority 7 so the dupes actually come and use it. I actually have to turn off my debug mode to actually queue a thing up here. So you can select what you want to refine. And at this point of the game, we probably only have copper. Maybe we'll have gold or iron, because there is lots of iron accessible on the map. So you see here, there's a big chunk of iron. And there's iron all over the place. So let's do copper, because we got lots of copper. Let's see here. So copper, that'll take copper ore and turn it into regular copper plus some sand. And we'll put that on continuous for now. So the dupes will come down and they'll smash this little button and make some refined metal for us. Here comes Nicola. Speed things up here. There they go. Smash it. It's a great animation. So that will, if you look under, well, refined metal will appear here once they get some done. There we go. So now we got a new category in the top right here, refined metal. We got 50 kilograms of copper, and they'll make even more of it for us. I might actually force some through here though, so we get a bunch. So there we go. Now that we have some refined copper, we can make a smart battery. Under power, we got the smart battery here. And it requires 450 kilograms of refined copper. And I'll put it up here by our cold generator. And we'll hook up the power to it. This is replacing my battery down here, so I'm going to get rid of that one. Now, the reason this helps you be more efficient is with a regular battery, the cold generator will just keep running and running and running, even if the battery is fully charged. So it'll waste coal. But in order to get this to work under automation, we're going to take an automation wire, which requires refined metal, which we just made. And we'll connect up here. So it's similar to power, but it has a different overlay. So if you hit F2, you get your power overlay, or you can hit it up here in the top right. But there's also an automation overlay, which looks very similar to the power, but it's a whole different thing. The plugs look slightly different than the power. So that's the power, that's the automation. Now there's a setting on the smart battery where we can say active, we'll set that to 50%. Or somewhere around 50%. And if you hover over the the slider, it says logic input will become active when battery is less than 50% charged. So if we turn our automation overlay back on, it's red right now because the battery is over 50%. And red means off, essentially. So it means that the cold generator will not run. It's disabled. See, it was disabled by automation. Now that the battery went below 50%, this wire turns green, which is on, and the cold generator will kick back into action to charge the battery back up to 100%. So in this manner, it's going to conserve your coal. You still have to deliver coal to it, but we can kind of see it. It's about to hit 50%. Let's take a look at it as it goes along here. It'll flip to red when it gets to 50%. At least it should. Okay, I think it's out of coal now, so that's a different problem. Let's set that to priority 8. Once they get some coal in there, then we can see it flip back. So there we go. We got coal. Battery gets charged back up. And the minute this battery comes back down to 50%, it'll disable everything. So that's the smart battery. We can use the same kind of smart battery. I'll replace it over here because it's more efficient this way. So we'll stick it there. I like to leave room for cooling between the power and the battery. And then we'll do an automation wire, connect those two together, and then set the battery. Make sure you set the active to 50% or somewhere around there. Doesn't need to be exactly 50. But that's going to save us a lot of coal in the long run. There's some other things we can do with automation. In the last episode, I set up this carbon skimmer. And it'll run as long as there's carbon dioxide in the air, and there's very little carbon dioxide now. There's only right around the carbon skimmer, there's milligrams, tiny amounts of carbon dioxide. So we don't want this thing kicking on when there's a tiny amount of carbon dioxide. So we're going to use some automation to make this a little bit more efficient. And to do automation for the, right now I'm going to use the atmo sensor. And under research, it's under improve ventilation. There's the atmo sensor. There's a liquid version as well called the hydro sensor. So under automation, we're going to do an atmo sensor. And I'm going to place it maybe right here to detect the atmospheric pressure levels. And then we're going to take an automation wire, connect it to the carbon skimmer. And we'll set this pressure threshold to become active if the pressure is above 1,000 grams of pressure. So based on that, if we look at the automation, it turns red because right now there's not 1,000 grams of pressure. It's more like, it's currently at 60. So if we set this down to, let's say, 22, it'll kick on because it's meeting the condition. Current pressure is 45, but if it's above 22, it'll turn on. And you can see it kind of flip back and forth as the pressure gets lowered from this thing using up the carbon dioxide. So I'm going to set it back to 1,000. And that way it won't be wasting energy. It'll only kick on when the pressure of the CO2 builds up to a certain quantity down here. Now you could make it even trickier because let's say some other gases got down here. Maybe there's some chlorine and some CO2 intermixing. You could do something like this. You could use a gaseous element sensor, and I'll stick that over here. And this thing will send a signal if it detects a certain type of gas. So we'll select carbon dioxide, and we'll put some automation over this way. And I'm going to send it to an AND gate. So under automation, we have a bunch of gates, and the AND gate basically says, let's stick it up here. Actually, maybe maybe down here. Let me figure out where I want to put this thing. I'll put it right here. Now this is kind of a background building, so it doesn't, you can build things over top of this and it'll be just fine. It kind of sits back on the wall, and if you want to deconstruct it, hit deconstruct or X and then select background buildings, and then you can destroy it. But what we're going to do is we're going to select the automation overlay and kind of delete what I did before. And we're going to send 2 wires here into the AND gate. We're going to send the atmo sensor into the atmo sensor, and we're also going to send the gaseous sensor in. So there's 2 inputs to the AND gate, and you can kind of see there's little arrows pointing in. So those are the 2 inputs, and this is the output. And the way these work is if this input is true and this input is true, then the output will be true. But if the let me add an extra wire here just so we can see the output. But if only one of them is true, and true being green, red being false, it will be false. So if one is red and one is green, or the other one's red and this one's green, this will be red. And then we'll send that into our carbon skimmer. So what it's saying is, if the pressure is over 1,000 grams, oh, this thing needs power. Let me add some power to this. These sensors take a tiny amount of power, so don't worry about that too much. So it says if the pressure is over 1,000 and it detects carbon dioxide, the output of this AND gate will be green or true, and then this will kick on. Now we can actually see some chlorine here. So what this is effectively doing is it's saying, you know, only work if there's carbon dioxide and the pressure is high enough. If there's chlorine sitting here, then it won't run, because the pressure might be high enough, but it's the wrong type of gas. And there's similar automation gates, like an OR gate, which does something similar but different. I'll just explain that briefly here. So the way this works is if one of the inputs or the other input is true, the output will be true. So let's just hook up some wires to show that as an example. And we'll use a switch. There's a signal switch here where we can turn on and off the inputs. So let's turn off this input, turn off this input, turn on the automation overlay. Now both are off, so both are red, and this is red. So if one of these is green or the other one is green, this will become green. So let's turn on one of them. So now we can see it turns green. Let's turn this one on. The output goes green. And if both are on, it will be green. But if both are off, it will be red. So the only way this can be red is if both of these are red. And there's uses for this kind of setup as well. But I won't get into that right now. There's other uses for the automation. You can use a hydro switch for pumping liquid. Let's say our liquid level, let's say we had some liquid pouring in this pool, but we were also pumping liquid out of this pool. We could, instead of the pump it, let's say the water level drained all the way down to the bottom here, and the pump was running and running until liquid poured in. It would be kicking on and off, and we could make it a bit more efficient by using a hydro sensor. And we could put that down at the water level here and hook it up to the pump. And we could say, if the pressure was above, let's say 50 kilograms of water, then turn on. And we can see that right now that condition is true, so it's green. So that would save us from the pump running even if a tiny, tiny amount of liquid was sitting in here. Let's say 1 gram of water fell in to the bottom here. The pump would turn on normally, but we don't want that to happen, so this can make it a bit more efficient so the pump isn't running all the time. So there's some other cool things under automation here that you can use. There is a thermo sensor, which is used for measuring temperature. So you could do something like, let's say you wanted to turn something off based on the temperature. Let's say it got too hot here. Actually, a really good example of this is the plastic maker, which will come in much, much later, but we'll just build one here to show the example. A polymer press. Now this thing makes plastic. I'm not gonna explain it in full detail, but it gets really hot as it operates. So we could do a thermo switch right above it and hook up the automation and say if the temperature got above, let's say 35 degrees, actually activate if below 35 degrees. So if the temperature is below 35 degrees, turn on the thing. If it heats up too much, turn off. So that's a use for the thermo sensor. Got some other interesting things in here, like the clock sensor. Let's say we only wanted the dupes to go into the bathroom during a certain time of day. We could put a clock sensor in here, and it has the activation time, and it has active duration. So green is the active duration. And let's say we wanted them to only go in here at, I'm going to try to get it to line up with nighttime here. So we could say only activate during the kind of the night cycle. And we'll hook up an automation wire to the door. So now it's locked because it's not nighttime, and I've just locked Nicola in here, but but it's an example of what you could do. You might want to create an escape hatch for them as well, because this thing locks the door. But I'll get rid of that because that's not, we don't actually want to lock them in there. And like I said, to destroy automation stuff, turn on the automation overlay so you can destroy it. There's some other things in here, like the pressure plate, weight plate. I've actually never really used this much, but if a duplicant kind of stands on this thing, we'll take Ruby here as an example. We'll move Ruby on top of it, and it turns green. So if a certain amount of weight is on there, right now Ruby weighs 30 kilograms. So if it's above, let's say 10, activate a signal. Let's put Ruby back on there so we can see it's activated again. So there's some cool stuff you could do with that. So you can get really advanced and elaborate in terms of what you can build with these logical gates. But I usually end up just doing kind of the basics. The most complicated thing I've ever done, I think, is just well, except for a musical video I did, was using AND gates and OR gates. I don't really get in, and occasionally I use a NOT gate. And what a NOT gate does is I'll just quickly show that with a switch. So we got a switch here, and automation wire going in, and automation wire coming out. So the signal going in right now is green. So all the NOT does is it flips the signal. And there's certain cases when you might want to do this. There's more elaborate things in here like the XOR gate, and a filter gate and buffer gate. I might do an advanced automation tutorial sometime. There's also a memory toggle. But for most uses, you don't really need that. There's also a duplicant checkpoint. Here's an example of where you might use the checkpoint. Right now it's green, but let's say there was the risk of this room being full of germs. We could use a germ sensor in this little room and hook it up to the door. I've actually never used this myself. But we could say if the current disease level is below 1,000 germs, then activate the door, but we need to send some power to that. It only requires 10 watts, pretty cheap. So right now, current disease is below 1,000, so they're allowed to pass. But if this got really diseased in here, then it would turn red. And we can kind of simulate that with a switch. So we'll turn off the switch. And then the dupes wouldn't be able to pass through this gate. So it's a good way of keeping them. Let's say I dug into, let's find a diseased area. This diseased area here. Let's say I dug in here and I put a deodorizer in there to start cleaning the air out. But I didn't want the dupes to go back in until the slime lung in there fell to a certain amount. I could put in a germ sensor and say, you know, activate the door or allow them to pass once the germs are reduced to a certain level. So that's a good example of where it could be used. Or you can just create a door and manually lock them out. So you could set up a cheap door like this pneumatic door and say lock, and it will lock them out. That way you don't need any automation at all, but you'll have to manually go in and open it up again. Now, this isn't an automation thing, but there's one thing I wanted to do in this episode, which was get our whatchamacallit, kitchen, not the kitchen. Under the room bonuses, there is a mess hall. Right now, they're just eating on the ground whenever they get their food. They're just eating wherever. So I want to put in some mess tables. And let's put those right here. And there's a maximum size. It's similar to the bedroom size, so let's just fill this up to the same size as the bedroom. And we'll put a door on the other side. And now this has become a mess hall. And they'll assign themselves whenever they go to eat to these little tables. I didn't need that many because I only have 6 dupes, but room to grow here. And this room gives a bonus to stress relief. Now they're changing the way stress works in the new update. There's a thing called quality of life, but it'll be similar. This room will give a bonus in some way to their happiness. And it's better for them to be in here to eat versus eating in there like Joshua's doing. I don't know why he's not eating at his table, but I guess he just really wanted to eat in there. Anyway, so I think that's going to be it for this one. I wanted to keep it all about automation. And I think I didn't cover everything. It's not an exhaustive automation tutorial, but kind of the basics that'll help you along, especially with the smart battery. That's going to save you a ton of coal. Now, with the base in the kind of the state it is right now, you could run it for quite some time, for quite a while, because you've got clean water, or actually germy clean water coming from your toilets, and you've got clean water pockets here for your bristle blossoms, and you've got mealwood that you're turning into meal lice, but this requires dirt, and at some point you would run out of dirt, and we're using algae for our oxygen, and at some point we're going to run out of algae because there's only so much of it here. But you could probably last, based on my experience, you could probably last about maybe 300 or 400 cycles just using the dirt and the algae and the water that you have, if you're kind of careful with your resources and you don't take on too many dupes. With a population of 6, that's usually what I take on, 6 or 8 at this point. So you could last a long time, but eventually you're going to need a source of clean water because these will run out, and you got to go find a steam geyser. And in order to find that, you're going to have to do some exploring. There's other sources of water like ice that you can get into. There's some ice up here we could get into. But you got to be careful like how you explore. You probably don't want to dig through the slime at this point because you're going to get diseased. So you got to kind of find a way around it without kind of going into the germs. Or you can build exosuits, but that's a little bit more advanced and might take a little bit more doing. So we could explore to the left a little bit more here by digging. I'll dig a little bit with the cheats, but then we'll send them over here to actually dig manually. So there they go. That's going to expose this area. Once an area starts to get exposed, things will start growing as well. Like before we expose this, nothing was really going on in there. But once we expose it, it starts growing and recycling, and these guys will start their little life cycle. So what's a safe way we could explore here? We could go along down through here. Like we could come in here. Let's we could go down here safely. Dig this out. Dig along here, avoid the slime. And kind of head down this way. Now this is kind of a convoluted path to follow. We could go in here and let a little bit of chlorine out, but I don't like letting chlorine out. And this will just expose more and more until we find a steam geyser. Now sometimes you'll be lucky and the steam geyser or water geyser will be like really close to your base. Sometimes it'll be really far away. But you do have this starting water, and as long as you're kind of careful with it and you're recycling your water using the sieve, like I said, you can last quite a while. And algae, you'll run out of algae, so you're going to have to find a different way to produce oxygen. And that is with the electrolyzer. But I'll save that for a different episode because that's pretty involved as well. So, hope you enjoyed that episode. Hope you learned some stuff. Hope that helped. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.